A little over a year ago, I had a job working overnight at a gas station close to my house. I'm a woman, and I was 31 at the time. I know, to some it seems unsafe for a woman to work a graveyard shift by herself. However, it was a slow store and the sheriff's office was about 20 feet across from it. I really didn't think that I would have that many problems. There would be about 30 customers in an 8-hour shift, and that was on a busier night. It was about 3:30 in the morning. I went outside to sweep the parking lot and last minute checked the trash cans. It was time for a cigarette and I had one headphone in kinda jamming out. Across the road in the parking lot of the sheriff's office, I saw a figure with his back to me. He was swaying back and forth while looking down. Honestly, it looked like he was enjoying a much needed piss. Against the sheriff's office though. Yeah, the building closed at 4 p.m. and didn't open until 6 the next morning, but why? By the back of his ripped white t-shirt, I remember that he had come in about 4 hours earlier. He was a total creep, and I could tell that he already had a good buzz going. I didn't say anything. I just took my eyes off of him and tried not to draw attention to myself. It was working until a car pulled in. I was still outside as they pulled up. I saw him look at the car and then at me, and back and forth again. As the customer was leaving, I walked her outside. I still had half a smoke burning and I had left my dustpan outside with the squeegee. We both heard him start to swear angrily and seemingly enraged in an argument with himself. She looked across the road and told me to be careful. I made an awkward joke about him being the one who should be more afraid of me or something like that. The man was still there but closer to the road, now facing the parking lot of my store. Whatever he was yelling was completely unintelligible. He was obviously very drunk, and he could barely stand straight, still swaying away. I didn't engage him, but I didn't take my eyes off of him this time. I just slowly walked back into the store. Something about his face really bothered me. It had a darkness to it, but his eyes looked wild. My experience during graveyard jobs had been that the crazy-eyed ones are the worst ones. It didn't look like it at all, and I wanted no part of it. I still had almost 3 hours to go and 2 before any other employees got there. Instantly, I went to the computer and I typed up a temporarily closed sign, just in case he wanted trouble. I was coming around the corner on my way to the doors when I saw that he had walked across the road to my side now. I literally just barely got the second door locked when he stumbled into a very small parking lot. My hand mimed the hand signal for cut across my neck, and basically saying, "Nope, sorry, you can't come in here, we're closed." I shook my head back and forth too, hoping to further discourage him. He started walking away but screamed something at me while he was walking. I don't mean he was grumpy and shouted at me or yelled that I was an asshole or anything. I mean like he was at an enraged volume and was violently throwing his hands everywhere. Definitely knowing that I'm in the wrong shift of the wrong job, I got really skeeved out. I decided to call the cops, and it's a good thing too, because the minute that I hung up with him, there he comes again up to the door. He starts pulling and banging on it. He backs up and runs into it, trying to ram it. Not that it would have done any good. I made the mistake of telling him that I had called the cops and that his ass was about to be grass. I say that I made the mistake of telling him because once I said that, he took off. The police never found him. They drove around the road and surrounding neighborhoods for over an hour, but they found no one. He was on foot, so I don't know where he could have gone to. He didn't harm me, and with them not finding him, I didn't fill out a police report or anything. I was safe behind thick glass doors that were locked for the rest of my shift. It just sucked. Maybe if I didn't warn him ahead of time, I wouldn't have had to spend the last 3 months of my job constantly looking over my shoulder. I'll never know what the right choice was. I'm just glad that I don't work there anymore. About 7 years ago, when I was 17, my parents went out of town for a weekend and left me at home. This was a pretty common occurrence. My parents trusted me. I would usually spend these weekends away, staying with friends or family, as my parents' house is a bit creepy to be alone in, even during the day. We live in a small rural town where everyone knows each other, and generally, it's pretty quiet and safe. Saturday, I was supposed to stay with a friend, but her parents decided at the last minute not to let me stay. It wasn't a big deal that I had to leave. I was somewhat prepared to have to go home because her parents got weird about company sometimes. I left her house, which is about 15 minutes from my parents' house, around 9:30 or 9:45. While I was on the way home, I got a weird feeling that I can't really explain. I just knew that I didn't want to go stay at my parents alone. I called my brother and I asked him if I could stay with him. At the time, he was living with a woman who had a small child. He told me that it would be quieter and easier for him to just come stay with me, since his dog would bark if I tried to come in the house. He said he would be to our parents' house in about 20 minutes. A side note that's relevant later. My brother's a relatively scary-looking guy. He's about 6'3", 200 pounds, pretty muscular and covered in tattoos. After hanging up, I decided to stop at the gas station and grab a snack before going home, so that my brother would be there when I got there. I pulled into the gas station. There were only a few cars on the lot, which is typical because this is a small town in the rural south, where everything pretty much stops after 8 p.m. I parked and I walked up to the door. There was a man standing outside the door smoking. He opened the door for me without saying anything. This is normal southern hospitality, especially since I'm a female. I smiled and thanked him. Inside, there was another man standing by the door. I noticed him staring at me as soon as I came in. He gave me that gross up and down look and said something to the effect of, "Hey sexy, what are you doing alone?" Creepy as heck. I just ignored him and I walked towards the back of the store. But he yelled after me and kept calling me names. I still ignored him. I figured that he was drunk or high, or just being annoying. Most people around here talk a big game but rarely back it up. I wasn't scared, just annoyed. I got my snacks and I paid at the counter. When I walked back up to the door, both of the men were gone. I was happy to not have to deal with any more catcalling. I began walking across the lot towards my car, which was probably about 100 feet away from the door. As I was walking, I looked down at my phone to see if enough time had passed for my brother to be at my parents'. When I looked up, the one guy who had hit on me was standing at the pumps, staring. I looked at him for a second and continued walking. "Hey, you know you're supposed to answer a man when he speaks to you," he said. I remember saying something snarky back to him and getting in my car. He looked pissed at my sarcasm. I locked my doors as soon as I was in my car, started it, and I was thinking of nothing but getting home to eat my snacks and hang out with my brother. I put my car in gear and realized that the man had disappeared. I looked around before pulling out of my parking spot, only to realize that both men were sitting in the car facing mine across the lot. They were both staring at me and talking, occasionally even pointing towards me. I just stared at them, defiant and upset. I didn't want them to think that they had scared me at all. While we were sitting having our staring contest, the man who had opened the door for me smiled and gave me the finger across the throat gesture, as in, "You're dead." I rolled my eyes and I pulled out of the gas station annoyed. To my dismay, they pulled out behind me. I hadn't been scared up until this point because, as I said, most people here are a lot of talk with no follow-through. Instead of going home, I took a few back roads that connect back in a sort of circle to see if they were following me, which of course they were. When they realized that I was testing them, they drove up really close to me and started laying on the horn. I couldn't see their headlights, they were so close. I called my brother and told him what was going on. He told me to come home and that he would handle it. I started driving home. The two men were still on my butt, blowing the horn. Even with my detours, I was about 3 to 4 minutes from my parents' house. I slowed down to pull in my driveway and was immediately relieved. At the end of the driveway, my brother was standing shirtless, with his shoulders back, hand crossed in front of his stomach, clearly holding a pistol. His intimidating-looking pit bull sitting by his side. I drove around him into the yard. The two guys actually started to pull in behind me until they saw my brother, and then they hightailed it out of there. I have no idea what they would have done if I had stopped somewhere alone or kept driving. I always think fondly of that image of him standing there like a badass ready to protect me. I'm thankful that he was there. This happened a year or so ago, so forgive a lack of specific detail. One day after work around 4 or 5 p.m., my girl and I, that I worked with, decided to go see a movie. It was a rough shift in her and I felt like a movie would be nice. She asked if we could stop by her house so that she could change clothes from our work uniform, and I said that it's fine, since it was maybe 5 minutes away tops. We stayed at her house for a bit. We ate a quick snack, and then got into my car. She asked if we could stop by the gas station by her house so she could grab a Red Bull. Once again, I was fine with that because it was right by her house. I drove to the gas station, and the only parking was on the side of an abandoned car wash next to the station. To form a better image, the gas station and the car wash were right next to each other, both entrances facing the same way. It was entirely dark outside. The gas station was a fairly run-down one and didn't have any lights at the gas pumps like most do. So, it was pitch black except for the light coming from my car. A semi-truck was on the side of the gas station and had cones indicating the area that would inhibit the driver to do what he needed. So, I assumed the parking spots wouldn't be too close and I parked. My friend got out and went inside. I decided to stay in the car since she would only be a few minutes. I locked my doors after she got out, as it was a force of habit to do so. I went on my phone for a bit. After a couple of minutes, I saw a light flash on in the driver's side mirror of my car. I turned to look, since it was pointed in my direction. The truck driver had a flashlight pointed at my window, and just held it there for a few seconds. And maybe 20 or so. I was kind of freaked out, but I assumed that he had a reason for doing so. He began walking towards my window, still with the flashlight on. I rolled down my window, no more than an inch, assuming maybe he was going to tell me to move my car or something. He stopped when he got 2 to 3 feet away from my window and then turned around. At this point, I was pretty scared, just because there was no reason for what he did. So I just rolled my window back up and I waited for my friend. I'm still watching the guy just in case, and I see him rummage around in the front part of his semi-truck for a bit. And then he stopped and he turned back to my car. There was something in his hand, I'm not sure what, and I'm glad that I didn't find out. He began walking towards my window. He was saying something inaudible, and it was at a rather loud volume. He got to my door this time and tried to open it. He tried to pull the handle a couple of times, but he couldn't open it. And then he started pulling more aggressively. My friend came out of the gas station and was walking towards my car. She looked scared. I was scared. The guy saw her come into my car and walked quickly back to his truck, and I drove away as quick as possible. I'm not entirely sure what happened, or what was going to happen. The only theory my friend had was that maybe when he saw that I was a girl, the first time that he had the flashlight, he assumed that I would be a good target to kidnap or put into trafficking. That's just a theory though. I'm glad I won't ever have to find out what he was doing. It was the middle of the night, maybe 12 or 1 in the morning, and I had snuck out to get a bag of chips or something from the gas station a few blocks away from my house. It was the middle of December, and it was snowing pretty heavily outside. For the record, I was 14 or 15 at the time. I have always been pretty small, at about 5'4" in height, and 115 pounds in weight. I'm female, but I've always had short hair and kind of a boyish face. The gas station was completely empty, besides a woman behind the cash register, who I remember had been far too busy with filing her nails to pay too much attention. I had been picking through some of the chip bags to find something good, when I heard the ding of the door as someone entered the small gas station. I didn't bother to look to see who it was. When I finally found what I was looking for, I turned to start heading towards the refrigerated section for a drink, before seeing the person who had just walked through the door. It was a tall, thin man, maybe 6'2", with brown hair, a red trucker hat, and a short, scruffy beard. He looked like he was in his late 30s or early 40s. I was surprised that I didn't recognize the man. I lived in a small mountain town, and everyone knew everyone. Oddly enough, he was wearing a short-sleeved t-shirt and shorts, despite it being freezing cold outside. His shirt and pants were covered in grass stains, as if he had just been working on a lawn or something. He turned to me and smiled a toothy grin, before moving away from the door to the refrigerated area so that I could grab what I needed. I knew I shouldn't have seen anything wrong with this, but something about the grin and the way that his eyes looked me over was already kind of a red flag. I've always been a very nervous and paranoid person. I moved in and I opened the door, quickly grabbing a drink and backing off. Before I could turn away, I heard the man's raspy voice as he spoke to me. "Hey, you look familiar," the man said. He had a somewhat southern accent, which wasn't that uncommon considering where I lived. "Oh, yeah," I responded, not sure what to say to him. He introduced himself as Thomas before leaning against the door. "Why is a young man like you doing out this late?" he asked. Again, I wasn't sure what to say. I wasn't a boy for one thing, but I didn't bother to correct him. Just getting a snack," I responded, trying to inch my way away, trying to give off the hint that I did not want to talk. Yet the man just trailed behind me. "Do you know my daughter?" he asked me, cutting off one of the aisles. "Well, who's your daughter?" I asked shakily in response. The man frowned at me, his eyes narrowing in my direction. He refused to tell me her name, claiming that he didn't want boys touching her daughter. I was confused by the sudden change of mood, so I didn't say anything else. I started making my way towards the register before he cut me off again. "Do you need a ride? It's cold out there," he said, getting uncomfortably close. At this point, I could smell the alcohol on Thomas's breath. It made me very uncomfortable. "No thank you," I said, trying to move around him. He insisted, and yet again I refused. I moved to try and push past him, bumping into a metal shelf. A can of chips fell off the shelf, hitting the floor. The lady behind the register looked up from what she was doing, noticing me and the man. "Are you ready to check out?" she asked me, glaring at Thomas. I nodded and the man moved out of my way. I paid for the chips and drink, before thanking the woman and moving out of the gas station. But it didn't end there. When I began my walk down the snowy road, I saw the man get into his truck before getting out a minute later. He was already quite a ways away when he began walking in the same direction that I was. I would have called someone for help at this point, but I didn't have a phone at the time. I had quickened my pace and eventually, he turned around and he went home. I don't want to think about what would have happened if the man would have kept following me. So Thomas, I don't think we should meet again.